When you hear the word space race, your mind probably jumps straight to the Cold War, right? The US versus the Soviet Union. But a totally new competition is heating up right now, and it looks completely different. So let's get into it. The 21st century battle for the ultimate high ground between the USA and China.
And this is not just about planting flags and getting footprints on another world anymore. As experts and lawmakers are pointing out, the stakes are so much higher. We're talking about a race for economic dominance, technological superiority, and strategic leadership that's going to define the next century. All right, so here's how we're going to break this whole thing down. First, we'll look at how this new race even started. Then, we'll zero in on the battle happening right over our heads in orbit. After that, we'll cover the big return to the moon, the tech that's making it all happen, and this is the big one, why any of it actually matters back here on Earth. And finally, we'll ask the big question, who's really set up to lead?
Now, let's be super clear about something. Right now, today, the United States is still #1 in space. It's got the strongest commercial industry, the most powerful rockets. But here's the thing. That leadership is being challenged, and China is moving at an absolutely incredible speed to close that gap.
So, what kicked off this massive acceleration? You can pretty much trace it all back to a single moment in 2014. A government policy called Document 60 basically threw open the doors for private money to flood into the space industry. And that created this classic hockey stick growth curve, leading to huge wins like their very own space station and a launch schedule that just keeps breaking records.
And that one policy, it unlocks some serious cash. We're talking about an estimated $3.81 billion being poured into China's commercial space sector in 2025. Now, to give you some perspective, back in 2015, that number was just $340 million. That's more than a 10x increase in a single decade. Just incredible.
Okay, so you look at the raw numbers over the past decade, and yeah, the US has outspent China by a factor of 5. But that number doesn't tell the real story. The real story is the trajectory. US spending has been pretty steady, while China's spending is just climbing and climbing year after year, all focused on one goal, becoming the leader in space.
So where is all this competition most obvious? Well, you just have to look up. It's happening right now, in low Earth orbit, and it's really a tale of two very different space stations. On one side, you've got the International Space Station. For decades, it's been this amazing symbol of global teamwork, but it was launched way back in 1998, and it's getting old. It's set to be decommissioned around 2032. On the other side, you've got China's brand new Tiangong station. They built it themselves after being barred from the ISS by US law. It launched in 2021, and it's fully operational with crews rotating in and out as we speak. And this brings up a huge looming question. What happens if the ISS is deorbited before the US has new commercial stations ready to go? We could seriously face a gap, a period of time where China's astronauts, they call them taikonauts, are the only human beings living and working in space. But this race isn't just about circling the Earth. Nope, it's pushing farther out to the next great destination, the Moon. And both countries see the Moon as the critical stepping stone for getting to Mars and exploring the rest of the solar system.
The US is charging ahead with its Artemis program, which is super ambitious. The goal is a crewed landing in 2028, but honestly, it's been hit with delay after delay. China, on the other hand, has set a very clear deadline. They want taikonauts on the Moon by 2030. And if we've learned anything, it's that when China's space program sets a deadline, they usually hit it.
Now, none of this is possible, not the space stations, not the moon landings, without the foundational tech. I'm talking about the raw power, the rockets that get you off the ground, and the satellite networks that keep everything connected.
And remember that 2014 policy? Well, because of it, China now has more than a dozen private rocket companies. They are aggressively, and I mean aggressively, developing reusable rockets, their own version of the Falcon 9, which is the key to launching cheaper and more often. And they've got absolute game changers on the drawing board, like the Long March 10 for their moon missions and the massive Long March 9, designed to go head-to-head with Starship. And it is the exact same story when you look at satellites. For a long time, the US has run the show with systems like GPS and now Starlink. But China has been methodically building its own parallel systems. They finished their Baidu navigation system, which means they're no longer dependent on GPS, and they're building their own Starlink competitor to give them global internet that's totally outside of US control.
So, why does any of this stuff matter to us? People who aren't planning a trip to orbit anytime soon. Well,
It matters a lot, because this competition has very real, tangible impacts on everything from the global economy to diplomacy and national security.
To really get why, you first have to understand something called China's Belt and Road Initiative. Just think of it as this gigantic global infrastructure project designed to build economic ties and expand China's influence all around the world.
And space is a core part of that strategy. China is going to other countries and building satellite ground stations for them. They're exporting their Beidou navigation services. This isn't just business, it's soft power. It creates these technological and diplomatic ties that slowly pull other countries into an orbit that's centered around China.
And all of this is causing new global alliances, new blocs to form. The U.S. has created the Artemis Accords, which is basically an open set of principles for peaceful and cooperative space exploration. In response, China and Russia are leading their own alliance built around a joint International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS.
Now, the U.S.-led Artemis Accords have been pretty successful at building a wide coalition. So far, 56 countries have signed on to these principles for peaceful exploration.
The competing China-Russia Lunar Initiative has signed up 13 partners. You can literally see the lines being drawn in the cosmos, lines that will define how we all operate in space for generations.
And we can't forget that these diplomatic lines have a very hard edge because space is now an absolutely indispensable part of national security. Everything from early missile warnings to guiding weapons to just basic communication on the battlefield, it all depends on satellites.
Which, of course, brings us to the final, biggest question of all. Who is going to lead in this new era? And what does winning even look like this time around?
The American strategy to stay ahead isn't just about the government building bigger rockets. It's really about unleashing the power of the private sector. The focus now is on investing in commercial spaceports, cutting the red tape to make it easier to launch, and having NASA act more like a customer, buying rides and services from companies instead of trying to own and operate everything itself.
Because at the end of the day, this race isn't going to be won by a single moon landing or one space station. The consensus is that the real winner, the nation that will truly lead, will be the one that builds the strongest, most innovative, and most resilient commercial space industry. And so, the ultimate question is, who's going to do it?